Every breath was pain. Every mile was a decision not to die. This isn't survival by strength. This is survival by refusal. Hugh Glass surviving the impossible where breaking is not an option. The American frontier did not feel like a place of opportunity. It felt like a place where the world stopped caring whether you lived or died. There were no roads, no safety, no rescue, no structures that meant permanence, just endless land, raw and unclaimed, stretching in every direction. Rivers that drowned men without slowing, forests that swallowed sound, winters that erased tracks, camps, and bodies without distinction. This was not a romantic wilderness. It was an indifferent one, the kind of land that did not reward courage, only endurance. Hugh Glass lived inside that world, not as a legend, not as a myth, not as a symbol, as a man who understood how fragile a body is when it is separated from society. He was a frontiersman, a hunter, a fur trapper, a man shaped by violence, exposure, and distance from civilization. His life was built on long absences from safety and long proximity to death. Hunger was normal. Cold was expected. Pain was routine. The wilderness taught him early that comfort was a lie humans invented for themselves. Men like Glass did not talk about fear. They learned to function inside it. The fur trade in the early 1800s was not commerce. It was extraction through suffering. Men pushed deeper into unknown territory, chasing beaver pelts through river systems that had never been mapped. Expeditions moved like slow scars across the land, leaving camps, bones, and graves behind them. Every journey assumed loss. Men disappeared into forests and were never seen again. Canoes overturned in rapids. Winter killed quietly. Infection took men weeks after small injuries. Animals were not villains. They were simply present, powerful, and uninterested in human survival. Grizzlies were not monsters in stories. They were facts. The wilderness did not dramatize death. It normalized it. Hugh Glass had lived long enough in that environment to stop believing in control. He believed in preparation, routine, instinct, but not safety. He knew that every expedition was a negotiation with terrain, weather, and chance. And chance always collected eventually. The trapping expedition that would change his life moved through untamed territory with the confidence of men who had survived before. They traveled rivers, cut through dense timber, crossed plains where the horizon never ended. Days were long. Nights were cold. Food was inconsistent. Danger was constant. But familiarity creates illusion. When you survive enough risks, you start believing you understand them. The men hunted, set traps, mapped routes, moved deeper into regions where help did not exist, where injury was a death sentence, where distance itself was lethal. Glass was not reckless. He was experienced, which which is often more dangerous, because experience creates patterns, and patterns create expectations, and expectations make the unknown feel predictable. The wilderness had watched this before. Men arriving with confidence, men believing they understood the land, men thinking survival was a skill, not a permission. The forest does not care about skill. It does not care about experience. It does not care about reputation. It only responds to movement, sound, hunger, threat, and sometimes proximity. The expedition moved through bare territory without drama. No tension in the air, no music, no warning signs, no foreshadowing, just normal movement through wild land. Glass moved ahead of the group, scouting, navigating, reading terrain. He walked with the quiet rhythm of someone who had spent years listening to the language of the wild, branches snapping, wind shifts, bird silence. The forest was alive, but calm. Then it changed. Not violently, not loudly, just wrong. A subtle stillness, a heaviness in the air, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural but doesn't yet feel dangerous. Glass moved forward anyway, because men don't turn back from silence. They walk into it. The wilderness did not announce itself. It never does. No warning, no build-up, no cinematic pause, just proximity. And then consequence. The wilderness had no intention of letting him leave alive. It happened without warning. No build-up, no moment of realization, no chance to prepare the body or the mind. 1 second, Hugh Glass was moving through tall grass and broken timber, scanning the land the way he had 1,000 times before. The next, the world exploded into weight, sound, and teeth. The grizzly came out of the brush at full force, not charging from a distance, not posturing, already committed. Glass did not see the bear so much as feel it. A sudden, overwhelming impact that drove the air out of his lungs and slammed him into the ground. The force alone was enough to break ribs. The smell hit immediately. Animal, blood, rot, wet fur. The bear was enormous. This was not a creature reacting in fear. This was a mother defending territory, cubs nearby, instincts locked in. The attack was not emotional. It was procedural. Claws struck first. They raked across Glass's back and shoulders with mechanical efficiency, tearing skin open like fabric. Muscle split, bone cracked. The pain was immediate and total, white-hot and disorienting, flooding his nervous system so fast that thought lagged behind sensation. He tried to scream. No sound came out. The bear's weight pinned him down. He could feel the ground through his chest, his face pressed into dirt and grass, mouth filling with soil and blood. One arm flailed uselessly. The other was trapped beneath him, already numb. Then the bear bit down. Its jaws closed around his upper body, shoulder, neck, collarbone, crushing and tearing in the same motion. Glass felt bones shift in ways bones were never meant to move. A sharp crack echoed inside his own skull. His collarbone snapped. Ribs gave way. The pressure stole what little breath he had left. Pain stopped being sharp. It became everywhere. The bear lifted him slightly, shook him, slammed him back down. Each movement stripped more flesh away. His scalp peeled partially loose. Teeth tore through his throat and back, leaving deep, ragged wounds that bled freely. Glass was conscious. That was the worst part. His mind tried to process the sensations, but there was no framework for this kind of pain. It did not spike and fade, it stacked, layered, compounded. Every nerve fired at once. His vision narrowed. Sounds distorted. Time slowed into disconnected fragments. The bear rose onto its hind legs and came down again, crushing him under its full weight. This was not an attack meant to scare. It was meant to end. Glass's body went into pure survival reflex. He played dead not as strategy, but because there was nothing else left to do. His muscles stopped responding. His breathing became shallow and involuntary. His heart hammered erratically, threatening to tear itself apart. The bear mauled him again, then again. Each pass felt final. At some point, Glass felt his spine grind against the ground. Later, he would discover his leg was broken, bone splintered. At the time, he only registered a dull absence where sensation should have been. Blood soaked into the earth beneath him, warm at first, then cooling. The bear eventually stepped away, not because Glass was safe, but because the threat had been neutralized. The animal lingered nearby, pacing, sniffing, making sure he would not move again. Glass did not move. He could not. He was breathing in shallow, broken gasps, his chest barely rising. His body was no longer something he controlled. It was an object being abandoned by consciousness piece by piece. When the bear finally left, there was no relief, only aftermath. Glass lay torn open, barely recognizable as human. His back was flayed. His neck was exposed. His throat had been ripped open enough that swallowing sent agony through his entire body. Blood loss was severe. Infection was inevitable. He was alive, but life was no longer something his body seemed designed to continue. His companions found him later. They did not recognize him at first. They saw a shape on the ground, a mass of blood and torn flesh. When Glass moved slightly, involuntarily, it startled them. Some thought he was already dead. They rolled him carefully. The damage was extensive. Bones broken, flesh hanging loose, the smell of blood already attracting flies. His breathing was shallow and irregular. His eyes opened briefly, unfocused, then closed again. No one believed he would survive the night. Even Glass did not seem aware enough to understand his condition. The men did what they could. They cleaned wounds as best they could with river water. They tried to set broken bones. They wrapped him in whatever cloth they had. But this was not care. It was delay. They knew the truth. Glass was dying. Keeping him alive meant stopping the expedition. It meant risking everyone else. It meant staying in dangerous territory with limited supplies, waiting for a man whose injuries no one had ever seen survived before. The wilderness offered no solutions, only choices. Glass drifted in and out of consciousness, fever already beginning to rise. His body trembled uncontrollably. Each breath sounded wet, painful. He could not speak. He could barely swallow. He was alive, but survival had already abandoned him. They stayed with him longer than they wanted to, not out of hope, but out of obligation. The expedition halted in hostile territory, surrounded by wilderness that did not pause for injury. Every hour spent waiting increased the risk of attack, starvation, exposure. The men argued quietly, then openly. No one said it directly, but everyone understood the same truth. Hugh Glass was already dead. His body just hadn't accepted it yet. Glass lay wrapped in blood-soaked cloth, barely breathing. His back was a ruined surface of torn muscle and exposed tissue. The wounds had begun to darken at the edges. Flies gathered despite attempts to drive them away. His throat gurgled when he inhaled. Fever burned through him, cooking his mind from the inside. When he regained consciousness, it came in flashes. Pain without shape, voices without meaning, faces swimming in and out of focus. He could not speak. He could not lift his head. His body responded only with spasms and shallow breaths. Every attempt to swallow felt like knives scraping through his neck. The men tried to decide what mercy looked like. Staying meant slowing the group to a crawl. Carrying him was impossible. Leaving him felt like murder. Killing him outright was discussed and rejected, not from morality alone, but from fear of bearing that act forever. The compromise was abandonment disguised as duty. 2 men were ordered to stay behind with Glass until he died. They were promised extra pay for the risk. They dug a shallow grave nearby, preparing for what they believed was inevitable. Glass sensed something shifting around him, not in words, but in tone. Human voices carry truth even when language is withheld. He felt the retreat forming before it happened. When the expedition finally moved on, it did so quietly. The 2 men stayed with Glass for days. They watched his breathing slow, then strengthen slightly. His eyes opened once, briefly. He did not recognize them. Fever had stolen his orientation. Infection had begun to settle deep into his wounds. The smell was overwhelming. Rot had joined blood. Maggots appeared first in the open flesh of his back. The men recoiled at first, then hesitated. Maggots meant decay, but they also meant something else. They ate dead tissue, not living. They cleaned wounds better than any knife. They left them. Glass drifted between delirium and blackness. His body was an ecosystem now: blood, bacteria, insects, heat. Pain came in waves, sometimes distant, sometimes total. His broken leg throbbed constantly. He could not feel his back anymore, not because it had healed, but because the nerves were failing. Then one morning, the two men did not return. Glass was alone. He did not immediately understand that he had been abandoned. Understanding required clarity, and clarity was rare. But the silence stretched. No footsteps, no voices, no fire being built, just wind, just flies, just breath. Eventually, the truth arrived. There was no help coming. There never had been. The knowledge did not come with panic. It came with something colder. Glass could not stand. He could not crawl properly. His leg was useless. His back could not bear weight. Turning his head sent lightning through his neck. He lay on the ground like discarded meat. And yet, his body kept breathing. Refusing to die was not a choice he consciously made. It was something deeper, older. The body, even ruined, clung to motion, to circulation, to heat. After days alone, Glass realized something unbearable. If he stayed still, he would rot where he lay. He began to move. At first, it was barely perceptible. A shift of the elbow, a drag of the torso. His skin stuck to the ground where blood had dried, pulling free reopened wounds. Pain returned, sharp and immediate. He screamed silently. No sound came out. He learned to move inch by inch, using his forearms and the one leg that still functioned. Each movement tore open flesh. Each breath burned. He stopped often not to rest, but because his body shut down without permission. He drank from puddles, from streams. He ate what he could reach: roots, insects, bits of raw meat when he found carrion. He used fire when possible, but often he could not manage even that. The maggots multiplied. They wriggled in his wounds, visible, undeniable. At first, revulsion surged, then acceptance. The pain from them was minimal compared to everything else. They cleaned what his hands could not. Glass became something closer to animal than man. He navigated by sun and instinct. He followed rivers when possible. He moved toward vague memory rather than direction. Civilization existed only as an idea, something far away that might never arrive. Each day was a negotiation. Move or die here. And every time he chose movement, he chose pain. There was no one watching, no one recording, no one cheering endurance, just a broken body dragging itself across land that did not care. Glass did not survive because he was strong. He survived because he refused to stop moving, even when survival itself felt like punishment. Distance stopped being measurable. Miles meant nothing when each foot of ground required agony. Glass no longer thought in terms of where he was going. He thought only in terms of the next movement, the next pull, the next breath that didn't collapse into choking pain. His body was a map of damage. The broken leg dragged behind him, swollen and stiff, sometimes numb, sometimes screaming. His back, once torn open, had begun to scab unevenly. Layers of dried blood and infection sealing over muscle that should never have been exposed. When those scabs cracked, which they often did, the pain reset itself completely. Cold became another enemy. Night temperatures dropped sharply. Glass had no shelter beyond what he could scrape together. He wrapped himself in animal hides when he could find them. Sometimes he slept pressed against the earth, using his own heat to stay alive. Frost formed on his skin. He woke stiff, barely able to move, joints locked by cold and swelling. Winter did not care that he was injured. Rivers did not slow for him. When he reached water, he faced a choice every time: cross or turn back. Turning back meant more distance. Crossing meant cold so intense it stole breath instantly. He entered rivers slowly, bracing himself, teeth clenched, body convulsing as icy water flooded his wounds. Pain here was not sharp. It was absolute. His muscles seized. His heart raced uncontrollably. He emerged on the other side, shaking violently, vision blurring, barely able to crawl far enough to avoid drowning. Animals watched him, not with curiosity, with calculation. Wolves tracked him from a distance. Birds circled when he stopped too long. Glass understood the signs. Predators recognize weakness. Movement kept him alive, not just physiologically, but strategically. Stillness meant becoming prey. Hunger returned with a different intensity. Now, not the dull ache of the camps, not the starvation of rationing, but the gnawing demand of a body trying desperately to repair itself without resources. He ate whatever he could find: raw meat torn from carcasses, roots dug from frozen ground, berries when available. He chewed slowly, carefully, throat still damaged, swallowing painful but necessary. Infection never left him. Fever came and went. Hallucinations crept in at night. He saw shapes in the dark, heard voices carried on the wind. Sometimes he thought he saw men ahead of him, companions, settlements, fires, only to crawl closer and find nothing. Rage became fuel, not loud rage, not violent outbursts, a steady, burning refusal. He thought of the men who left him, not with hatred, but with fixation. Their faces became markers in his mind, proof that he had something unfinished. Not revenge in the cinematic sense, just a need to reach the end of the story on his own terms. Pain became his constant companion. It did not lessen. He learned to move through it rather than wait for relief that never came. Each breath was deliberate, each movement calculated. He stopped screaming internally because screaming required energy he could not spare. Days blurred together. Glass lost track of time. Sunrises and sunsets became indicators only of survival. I lived through another cycle. That was all that mattered. Sometimes he collapsed completely, unable to move for hours. His body shut down, forcing stillness. When sensation returned, it did so brutally. He resumed crawling without reflection. There was no progress without suffering. There was no suffering without progress. Eventually, the landscape began to change. The land felt less hostile, not kinder, just more familiar. Signs of human presence appeared. Old camps, paths, distant smoke. Each sign pulled him forward, not with hope, but with obligation. He was not crawling toward rescue. He was crawling toward completion. Every breath was a decision to suffer one more day, and he kept choosing it. When Hugh Glass finally reached the edge of civilization, it did not feel like arrival. There was no moment where pain stopped. No line crossed where survival transformed into safety. His body entered human space before his mind accepted it. People stared first, not out of recognition, but disbelief. The thing that emerged from the wilderness barely resembled a man. He was skeletal, scarred, limping, wrapped in hide stiff with blood and dirt. His back was a ruined landscape of scar tissue and infection. His leg never fully bore weight again. He had not returned whole. He had returned unfinished. Glass was taken in, treated as best as the era allowed. Wounds cleaned, flesh stitched, bones set where possible. Fever watched carefully. Infection fought without medicine that truly understood it. Healing was slow and incomplete. Pain did not end with survival. It settled in. Every movement reminded him of what his body had been forced through. Nights were restless. Sleep brought back pressure, teeth, weight. The bear never left him. The wilderness never left him, and neither did the memory of abandonment. When Glass learned the names of the men who left him, learned where they were, the knowledge did not ignite rage the way stories would later suggest. Revenge did not consume him. It simply existed as a question. What does justice mean after something like this? When he finally encountered one of them, there was no dramatic confrontation, no violence, no satisfaction. The man was younger, afraid, changed by the same frontier that had nearly killed Glass. Killing him would not undo the crawling, would not unbreak the bones, would not return what was taken. Glass chose to walk away, not because he forgave, but because survival had already cost him enough. His body carried permanent damage. His scars never softened. His strength never fully returned. The wilderness had taken payment and kept it. Glass continued to live on the frontier because that was the only world he understood. But something had shifted. The land was no longer a challenge to overcome. It was a force to endure cautiously. He did not speak often about what happened. Stories grew around him anyway. They exaggerated. They polished. They turned refusal into heroism. They turned pain into legend. But Glass knew the truth. Survival did not feel triumphant. It felt expensive. It left no room for pride, only for quiet awareness of how close the body always is to collapse. He had not conquered nature. He had not mastered suffering. He had simply refused to stop moving when stopping would have been easier. And that refusal changed nothing about the world. It only kept him alive. He survived, but nature never gave him anything back.